I was 17 the first time I disappeared. Not in the way people romanticize it, not some moody teenager running away from home with a backpack and a dream. I disappeared because my mother sat me down at our kitchen table in Dayton, Ohio, on a Tuesday afternoon in March, and told me that we were leaving. She said it the way someone describes a medical procedure they have already scheduled. There was no discussion. There was no debate. She had already packed our bags into the trunk of our car. She had already chosen a new city. She had already selected a new last name from a baby name book she bought at a gas station off Interstate 75. The book was yellow. I remember the color because I remember thinking it was strange, how a book meant for beginnings was being used for an ending. She told me about the woman. She told me about the 3 months of observation. She told me about the notes that had been appearing in our mailbox, notes written on plain white index cards in neat, careful cursive. She told me that she had gone to the police twice, and that they had listened and nodded and explained that what was happening to us was unusual but not illegal. She had been shielding me from all of it, absorbing the fear by herself while I went to school and worked on homework and lived the kind of unremarkable teenage life that depends entirely on a parent keeping the walls standing. By the time she told me, the decision had already been made. We were not discussing whether to leave. We were leaving. We moved to Tucson, Arizona. My mother became Linda Voss. I became her son, Ethan Voss. We enrolled in new schools, found an apartment near a strip mall with a laundromat and a sandwich shop, and we started over the way people do when starting over is the only option that does not involve accepting something unbearable. I want to describe what that apartment felt like in those first weeks, because it matters for understanding everything that came later. It felt like a held breath. Every room was temporary, every surface provisional. We did not hang pictures. We did not buy furniture that could not be abandoned. We lived in that apartment the way travelers live in hotel rooms, with the understanding that comfort is a luxury available only to people who believe they will stay. I need to tell you who she was, or at least what we knew about her, because that is the part that has never made sense, and the part I have spent my entire adult life trying to understand. Her name, the one we knew, was Claire Duval. She was a piano teacher, or at least that is what a neighbor told my mother when she asked who lived in the townhouse 4 blocks from our street. She lived alone. She had no criminal record, no history of mental illness that anyone could find, no connection to our family that anyone could trace. She appeared in our lives the way a crack appears in a windshield, small at first, almost forgettable, and then suddenly the only thing you can see. It started with the notes. My mother found the first one on a Monday in December. It was tucked inside our mailbox, not mailed, just placed there by hand. It said, "Your son left for school at 7:14 today. He wore the blue jacket again. He looks tired." There was no signature, no return address, just neat cursive on a white index card. My mother told me later that she stood at the mailbox for a full minute, reading it over and over, trying to find the interpretation that made it harmless, a neighbor being friendly, a school parent being observant. She almost convinced herself. Then the second card arrived 2 days later. "You bought whole milk this week instead of 2%. I hope everything is all right." Then a third, then a fourth. Each one calm, each one specific, each one demonstrating a knowledge of our daily routines that could only come from sustained, deliberate observation. My mother went to the police after the fourth card. They read them carefully. They agreed the cards were unusual. They explained that unusual is not illegal. They told her to document everything and to call if the behavior escalated. My mother asked what escalated meant in practical terms. The officer said if she threatens you or trespasses on your property. My mother said, and if she just keeps watching. The officer did not have a good answer for that. I have thought about that exchange many times over the years, how the entire architecture of protection available to us depended on a person doing something overt, something that crossed a line that was drawn for physical actions in physical space. Watching is not an action in the way the law understands action. Knowing is not a crime. And so we were left in the gap between what was happening to us and what the system was built to recognize. My mother identified her 3 weeks later. She saw a woman standing near the bus stop across from our house, not waiting for a bus, not checking a phone, just standing with her hands at her sides, looking at our front door with an expression my mother described as patient, not aggressive, not predatory, patient. The way someone looks at a clock when they know exactly what time it is and are simply confirming. My mother walked outside and crossed the street and confronted her directly. The woman smiled and said her name was Claire Duval and that she was sorry if she had caused any worry. She said she lived nearby and had noticed our family and felt a connection. She used that exact word. Connection. My mother told her firmly and clearly to stay away from us. Claire nodded, apologized again, and walked away at a calm, unhurried pace. And the note stopped for 2 weeks. Then they resumed, and this time they referenced things that should have been impossible to observe from outside. Your son fell asleep on the couch last night with the television on. You covered him with the green blanket at 11:40. That was kind of you. My mother checked every window, every lock. She bought blackout curtains thick enough to eliminate any possible line of sight. She moved our evening routines to interior rooms with no exterior-facing windows. The notes continued. They described things that happened in rooms that had no way to be seen from outside. The cards kept arriving in the mailbox, calm and unsigned, and each one proved that whatever method Claire Duval was using to observe us existed beyond the range of any countermeasure my mother could devise. We left Dayton 9 days later. Yet Tucson was good for a while. A long while, actually. Almost 2 full years. I finished high school as Ethan Voss. I made friends, real ones, the kind you eat lunch with and argue about movies with and drive around with on Friday nights doing nothing in particular. I got a part-time job at a pet supply store. My mother found work as an office manager for a dental practice. We did not talk about Claire Duval. We did not talk about Dayton. We built something that felt, if not normal, then close enough to normal that the difference stopped mattering on most days. My mother still checked the mailbox with a particular tightness in her jaw, and she still glanced at the street before closing the front door. But these were small things, survivable things, habits that I told myself would fade with enough distance and enough time. I was 19 when I found the first index card in our Tucson mailbox. It said, "Tucson suits you. You seem less tired." Same handwriting, same white card, same neat measured cursive. No postmark, no envelope. Just placed inside the box by a hand that had reached across 1,000 miles and 2 years of silence and new names to deliver a single sentence of observation. My mother did not cry. I think she had moved past the part of fear that produces tears and into the part that produces calculation, the cold geometry of what to do next, how far to go, what to change. She sat at the kitchen table and made a list. We needed new names, a new city, but this time she said something that stopped me cold. She looked at me across the table and said, "She knows your face. Not our address, not our names, our faces, and the things we could not change with a gas station baby name book and a moving truck." I want to be clear about what happened next, because I think it is the part where people will want to call this exaggerated, and I need you to understand that none of it felt dramatic while it was happening. It felt like arithmetic. It felt like solving a problem that kept adding variables faster than you could isolate them. I cut my hair. I had worn it long since middle school, past my ears, sometimes past my collar, and I cut it close to the scalp, almost military length. I started wearing glasses with clear, non-prescription lenses. I lost weight, not intentionally at first, but the stress stripped about 15 pounds off me over the following 2 months, and I did not try to gain it back because the thinness changed the shape of my face. My mother dyed her hair from brown to an ashy blonde. She changed the way she dressed, abandoning the bright colors she had always favored for muted, forgettable tones. She practiced a different posture in front of the bathroom mirror, slightly hunched, less upright, the kind of body language that makes people's eyes pass over you without registering anything worth remembering. We moved to Portland, Oregon. We became the Maddox family. I was Jason Maddox. My mother was Diane Maddox. We found an apartment in a dense neighborhood in the southeast part of the city, surrounded by enough people and enough foot traffic and enough constant ambient activity that anonymity felt like a structural feature of the environment, rather than something we had to construct ourselves. We chose it for exactly this reason. We wanted to be invisible the way a single drop of water is invisible in a river. I enrolled in community college. My mother got a job at a nonprofit that helped resettle refugees, which carried an irony neither of us had the energy to find funny. I grew a beard over the first winter. I started running in the mornings, not for health, but because the routine reshaped my body in ways that added another layer of difference between who I was and who I had been. By the end of the first year in Portland, old photographs of me from Dayton looked like pictures of a cousin I had not seen in years. Someone related to me, but distinctly, recognizably not me. Portland gave us 4 years. 4 years of normalcy so thorough and so uninterrupted that I began to quietly renegotiate my understanding of everything that had happened. Not the facts. The facts were documented and real, but the scale. I started to think maybe Claire Duval had been a lonely, mentally unwell woman who had fixated on us temporarily and then lost track when we moved far enough. Maybe the Tucson card had been a coincidence. Some other person, some other explanation. The mind does this. I have learned this about the mind. It renegotiates the past to make the present livable. It adjusts the weight of old events until they feel manageable, portable, small enough to carry without stopping. It is not denial. It is more like the psychological equivalent of inflation. The currency of old fear gradually loses its value until you can hold it in your hand and feel almost nothing. I was 23 when I came home from a late evening class and found a white index card tucked beneath the windshield wiper of my car in the apartment parking lot. You look different, but you hold your keys the same way. Right hand, third finger through the ring, thumb on the longest key. You have done this since you were 15. I sat in my car for 40 minutes. The engine was off. The parking lot was empty. The overhead light buzzed and flickered in a way I had never noticed before but would never stop noticing after. I sat there and I felt the entire 4-year architecture of normalcy come apart, not with a crash, but with the slow, quiet settling of a structure whose foundation had been sand all along. She had not lost us. She had not given up. She had watched me long enough and closely enough to identify a behavioral detail so small, so automatic, so entirely unconscious that I had never once been aware of it myself. She knew how I held my keys. She had known since Dayton. I did not tell my mother. That was the first time I broke the rule we had lived by since I was 17. The rule that said we share everything. We hide nothing from each other, because secrecy is the space in which threat grows. I did not tell her because I had watched what 6 years of this had done to her. The woman who had crossed a street in Dayton and confronted a stranger with her jaw set and her voice clear had become someone who checked the locks 4 times before bed and slept with her phone on her chest and flinched at the sound of the mail slot. I could not hand her another card. I could not be the one who broke the peace she had built with such effort and such fragile discipline. So I handled it alone. I installed a dash cam in my car. I changed my parking spot every day. I varied my schedule, left for class at random times, took different routes, or entered the building through different doors. I watched every face in every crowd for repetition. I watched for anyone who appeared in more than one place at more than one time. I did this for 3 weeks with the methodical focus of someone performing an experiment, and I found nothing. No one followed me. No face appeared twice. The dash cam captured hours of empty lots and quiet streets and rain. Then a second card appeared, inside the glove box of my locked car, not under the wiper, inside a compartment that required opening the car door, sitting in the passenger seat, and reaching forward. It said, "You have been looking for me in the wrong direction. I am not behind you." I need to tell you what that sentence did to me, because it is the hinge point of everything. Every model I had for understanding what was happening depended on directionality. A stalker is behind you. A watcher is across from you. A threat occupies a position in space relative to your position, and safety is a matter of identifying that position and increasing the distance. That card dismantled the model entirely. She was not behind me. She was not in front of me. She was not in any direction I could turn toward or away from. She was inside the structure of my life, present not as a person in a location, but as a quality of the environment, like humidity, like the particular silence of a room that is not empty even though you cannot see what is filling it. I told my mother the next morning. She did not sit down and make a list. She sat very still at the kitchen table and said 2 words, "I know." I asked what she meant. She opened her nightstand drawer and showed me a card she had received 2 weeks before mine and hidden from me for exactly the same reason I had hidden mine from her. It said, "Diane, you look exhausted. You should let Jason help more with the worry. You are carrying it unevenly." She had been protecting me. I had been protecting her. And Claire Duval had been watching us protect each other, observing the shape of our mutual silence, and she had described it with the precision of someone who understood not just our actions, but the emotional logic behind them. She knew why we were hiding from each other. She knew the weight each of us was carrying. She wrote about it the way a thoughtful friend might, with concern, with gentleness, with an intimacy that made my stomach turn because it was indistinguishable from love. We did not run again. I need to explain this decision because from the outside it must look like surrender, and it was not. We sat together for a long time that night, and we talked, really talked, in a way we had not since Dayton. What we concluded was that running had never worked. 3 cities, 3 names, physical transformations thorough enough that I could not find myself in old photographs, and she had found us every time without apparent effort or delay. Running was not a strategy. It was a performance, a ritual we enacted to feel like we had agency, and she had allowed us to enact it. She had given us the years of peace between discoveries. I use the word given deliberately, because that was what it felt like in the parking lot that night. Not that she had lost us and found us again. Not that our countermeasures had bought us time. That she had always known exactly where we were, and had simply chosen when to let us know she knew. We stayed in Portland. We went to the police. We brought every card, organized chronologically, alongside a written timeline of every move and name change. The detective assigned to us was thorough and took the situation seriously. He ran the name Claire Duval through every system available to him and found nothing. No driver's license in any state. No social security number. No tax records. No property records. No utility accounts. No employment history. He checked the townhouse address in Dayton that my mother remembered. Property records showed it had been vacant for 6 years before we moved to that neighborhood and remained vacant for 3 years after we left. No one named Claire Duval had ever been registered to that address or any address within 50 miles of Dayton, Ohio. He asked whether we were certain about the name. My mother described her precisely. Medium height, dark brown hair cut just above the shoulders, mid-40s, possibly older, thin face with high cheekbones, calm expression, a voice that always sounded like it was continuing a conversation rather than starting one. The detective ran the description through every database he had access to and cross-referenced it with known persons of interest in all 3 cities. Nothing matched. Claire Duval, as a legal person, did not exist in any system. We hired a private investigator with money we could not really afford. He worked for 3 months and found exactly what the detective had found, which was nothing at all. No trace, no footprint, no record. He told us that in his professional experience, this level of non-existence was not consistent with a civilian operating independently. He said it suggested either a fabricated identity constructed with extraordinary sophistication, or a person who had genuinely never existed within any bureaucratic or institutional system at any point in their life. He said both options were, in his words, deeply unusual. The cards continued throughout our remaining time in Portland, one every 2 or 3 months, never threatening, never demanding, each one simply demonstrating knowledge. She knew when I changed jobs. She knew when my mother started seeing a therapist on Wednesday evenings. She knew when I adopted a cat from a shelter on Division Street. She knew the cat's name before I had told anyone outside the apartment. Each card carried the same implicit communication, not "I will hurt you, but I am here," "I have always been here," and the distance you believe exists between us is a distance I am permitting, not a distance that is real. I was 25 when I tried something new. I wrote a message on a white index card in the neatest handwriting I could manage. Who are you? What do you want from us? I placed it in our mailbox with the flag raised. It was irrational. There was no reason to believe she checked our outgoing mail, but every card she had left proved she had physical access to that box, so I treated it as a two-way channel, and I waited. The card was gone the next morning. 19 days passed with no response. Then I found a card on the passenger seat of my locked car, parked on the third floor of a concrete garage, with security cameras covering every entrance, every stairwell, every square foot of every level. It said, "You have been asking the wrong question for 8 years. The question is not who I am. The question is why you can still see the cards." I brought the security footage to the detective. He reviewed 4 hours of continuous recording, covering every angle on my car and every entrance to the structure. No one approached the vehicle. No one entered the third floor during the relevant window. The footage was uninterrupted, unedited, and clean. My car sat in its space, untouched by any visible person, and a card materialized inside it. The detective stopped returning my calls after that. I do not blame him for this. I think he reached the edge of what his professional framework could accommodate, and rather than step past it, he stepped back. I would have done the same. My mother and I sat on the floor of our apartment that night and talked in circles for hours. What did the card mean? Why can you still see the cards? What did still imply? That the ability to perceive them was temporary? That it was deteriorating? Or that the cards existed in a way that most people could not perceive at all, and we were anomalies not because we were being watched, but because we were capable of seeing that we were being watched. I have thought about that sentence almost every day since. I have never arrived at an interpretation that does not lead somewhere my understanding cannot follow. My mother died 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. It was fast and merciless, and had absolutely nothing to do with any of this, which made it worse in a way I still cannot fully articulate. Because it meant the world was capable of delivering ordinary devastation on top of everything else, without any regard for proportion or fairness or narrative logic. After she died, I moved to a city I will not name. I changed my name for the 4th time. I look nothing like the boy from Dayton. I have a different build, different posture, different facial hair, a scar on my chin from a cycling accident that further altered the shape of my face. I work a job I will not describe in a field I will not identify. I have built a life with as few distinguishing features as possible, not out of active fear anymore, but out of a deeply ingrained discipline, the way a person who has been through a flood builds their next house on higher ground, not because they see clouds, but because they have learned what water can do. The card stopped when my mother died. I have not received one in 2 years. For the first several months, I interpreted this as an ending. Then I considered the possibility that my mother had been the actual focal point all along, that Claire Duval's attention had been directed at her and not at me, and that her death had severed whatever thread connected them. Then I considered a third interpretation, one that keeps me awake more often than I would like to admit. The possibility that the cards have not stopped, that they are still appearing, in mailboxes and glove boxes and spaces I check every day, and that what has changed is not their presence but my ability to see them. Because that is what the last card told me. The question is not who I am. The question is why you can still see the cards. Still. A word that contains a countdown. 3 weeks ago, I finally opened a box of my mother's belongings that I had not been able to touch since her death. I went through it slowly, handling each item with the careful attention of someone cataloging artifacts. Near the bottom, under a stack of old tax returns and a folder of my childhood drawings, I found a white index card. The handwriting was not Claire's. It was my mother's, looped and slightly uneven the way she always wrote. It said, "If you are reading this, I have been gone for a while, and you need to know something I never told you. The first card in Dayton was not from Claire. It was from me. I wrote it to see if you would notice. You did not. But she did. And that is when she began. I have read that card more times than I can count. I have held it under lamps and compared every stroke of every letter to the cards Claire sent over the years. The handwriting is completely different. My mother's was warm and imprecise. Claire's was deliberate and clean. They were not written by the same hand. But what my mother's card tells me is that Claire Duval did not find us through obsession or surveillance, or any mechanism I had spent 14 years assuming. My mother wrote a single note, one card, placed it in our own mailbox in Dayton as some kind of experiment or exercise or expression of something I will never fully understand, and something noticed. Something that was not Claire Duval, because Claire Duval does not exist in any database, any record, any system, any security camera. Something that saw my mother's small, our private act of expression and interpreted it as an invitation. Something that adopted a name, a face, a calm and meticulous voice, and followed that invitation across 4 cities and 4 names and 14 years with the patience of something that does not experience time the way we do. I do not know what my mother was testing. I do not know if she was lonely in a way I was too young to recognize. I do not know if she wrote that first card to herself as some strange act of self-observation and accidentally opened a door she did not know existed. I will never know because she is gone, and the dead do not clarify their intentions. I am 31 years old. I am sitting in an apartment in a city I will not name, and it is late and the room is quiet. The mailbox was empty this morning. It has been empty every morning for 2 years. I check it the way you check a wound that has closed but never fully healed, not expecting blood but unable to stop looking. I do not know if the silence means I am alone. I do not know if it means the thing that called itself Claire Duval has gone wherever such things go when the person they were answering is no longer alive. Or if it means the cards are still arriving and I am losing the ability to see them, the frequency narrowing, the door closing from my side while it remains wide open from hers. What I know is this. My mother sat at a kitchen table in Dayton, Ohio, and she wrote something on a white index card and placed it in a mailbox. Maybe she was lonely. Maybe she was testing herself. Maybe she just needed to put something into the world that proved she was real and present and paying attention to her own life. And something out there, something without a social security number, or a driver's license, or a face that shows up on any camera, read what she wrote. Not the words, the want beneath them, the ache that moved the hand. And it answered, and it never stopped answering. I changed my name. I changed my city. I changed the shape of my face, and the way I carry my body, and every identifying detail I could reach. None of it mattered. I was never the one being chased. I was never the one being hunted. I was the residue of a conversation that started before I understood it was happening. A signal my mother sent into a space she did not know was occupied, and the reply has been arriving ever since, in neat cursive on white index cards that no camera can see being delivered, and no database can trace to a human hand. A frequency. Most of the time nothing hears it. Most of the time the note sits in the drawer and fades and means nothing to anyone but you. But sometimes, rarely, something is listening on exactly that frequency. And when it hears you, it does not forget. It does not lose interest. It does not respect the distance you place between yourself and it, because distance is a concept that applies to things that occupy space, and I am no longer certain that what found my mother occupies space in any way I understand. I check the mailbox every morning. It is always empty. I am not relieved. I am not frightened. I exist in a state beneath both of those, a low and constant awareness that empty does not mean unanswered, that silence is not the same as absence, and that the most frightening thing about my life is not that something found me across 4 names and 4 cities and 14 years. It is that I am no longer sure it ever had to look. Remember, some places don't want you to leave. Thanks for watching the video.